2 days after the severed head of a missing student was discovered in a remote mountain area, the local police department received multiple reports of a white Toyota Corolla being driven erratically on the expressway before bursting into flames. Both of the car's occupants were killed. Confused eyewitnesses stated that the car had been continuously reversing and crashing into the guardrails, almost as if it was under some kind of supernatural control. Now, around the same time, a television news crew was reporting from the entrance to a dark and eerie forest. Now, as people watched this live broadcast, they were absolutely startled to hear the chilling, disembodied voice of a woman speaking in the background. Viewers were absolutely convinced that they had just heard the ghost of the murdered student. Now, it would take 7 years for these two seemingly unrelated incidents to be connected in a more disturbing way than anyone could have ever anticipated. Hello, welcome to my true criminal abode. It's my favourite time of the year. So today I am mixing true crime with an element of supernatural. Saying that, today's case is a sad one. Now, it's Halloween, we're allowed to be a little bit chill, but today's case isn't fiction. Miyako, the student in this case, she was a very real person. She was a young woman with her life ahead of her, and it was stolen by some loser. Now, I love the supernatural element in this case because it gives that little bit of hope. You know, there's a little bit of a revenge element. Now, as ever, there is a trigger warning, and as I always say, you look after yourself. So let's get on with today's case, which is the ghostly revenge of Miyako Hiraoka, and a tale of haunting justice, hopefully. Miyako Hiraoka was a first-year student at Shimane University in Japan. Now, she had recently moved from her hometown of Disembodied City in Kaguya to the picturesque city of Hamada. Now, Hamada faces the Sea of Japan and boasts stunning beaches and has magnificent mountain ranges. It really is stunning. Now, Miyako was an excellent student with a promising future ahead of her. She was a compassionate person who participated in fundraising activities to support developing countries, and she aspired to find a career where she could utilize her English language skills. And I am sure that she would do a lot better than what I am going to do in this case. So apologies in advance. I keep looking down because I've kind of written out the Japanese names in kind of like phonetics. Because it's really quite hard. My Japanese is a little bit rusty. I don't speak Japanese. But, so I do apologise in advance if I butcher some of these Japanese terms. Now, anyway, Miyako had dreams of studying abroad, and she was actually eagerly anticipating an upcoming exchange programme that would take her to Russia the following year. However, financing both her studies and the programme was costly, and in order to save the necessary funds, Miyako worked a part-time job at an ice cream parlour in a shopping mall about half a mile away from her home. Now, on October the 26th, 2009, Miyako worked her usual evening shift with nothing unusual reported. Now, when the parlour closed for the day, she bagged the trash, she turned off the lights, she locked the door, and she left the premises. Now, CCTV footage did capture her walking through the shopping mall towards the exit at approximately 9:16 p.m. Now, upon leaving the mall, Miyako could have taken a bus directly home, but to save money, it is believed that she decided to walk the 30-minute route, which she had done many times. Now, usually Miyako would have made the walk back with a co-worker who lived in the same area as she did. But her co-worker had recently resigned, leaving Miyako to make the journey alone. Now, interestingly, Miyako had herself made plans to leave her job, having secured a new position closer to her home that was set to start in the upcoming days. But until then, without the added reassurance of her co-worker to accompany her, Miyako would have had to navigate the dark, secluded path alone. Now, let's be real, women generally walking alone at night, for them, safety is always at the back of their minds. It's going to be a wonderful day, the day that women don't have to worry about walking home. And men, not excluding men as well, but generally speaking, it can be pretty scary being a female walking alone, especially at night. But Hamada was a pretty safe city. It had low crime, it had quiet streets, it had a reputation for peaceful living, and violent crime was rare. So Miyako probably was less worried than someone in a high crime area. But it still would have been a concern for her. Now, the thing is, we don't actually know if this was the path that she ultimately chose to take, because there's an absence of CCTV footage after Miyako left the shopping mall. So what she did after she left work is unclear. But what we do tragically know is that Miyako never made it home. Now, when Miyako failed to show up for her scheduled shift the following afternoon, the manager of the ice cream parlour, who was already short-staffed and really frustrated, he attempted to contact Miyako to find out where she was. Now, when his attempts to contact her were unsuccessful, he grew concerned and he contacted Miyako's mother, who also obviously expressed concern. And her mother actually explained that Miyako had promised to call her the previous evening, but that call never materialized. Now, following this exchange between the manager and the mother, Miyako's mother contacted the police to report her daughter missing. The Shimane Prefectural Police immediately launched an investigation to find Miyako. None of this hanging around malarkey, which is good. Now, residents of Hamada considered their city a safe place to live. So as news of Miyako's puzzling disappearance spread through the community, they became on edge, particularly at night, fearing that a kidnapper or a murderer was roaming their streets. And the authorities were determined to find Miyako as quickly as possible. However, despite their dedicated efforts and resources, the investigation into Miyako's disappearance led to nothing but dead ends. There was no surveillance footage. None of the eyewitness accounts they received seemed significant, and there were no viable leads to follow. Miyako had simply vanished without a trace. But then on November the 6th, 2009, 11 days after Miyako's disappearance, a mushroom hunter made a grisly discovery in the woods near the summit of Mount Garyu in Kita-Hiroshima-cho. Oh, I nearly got that. Kita-Hiroshima-cho. About 15 miles from the ice cream parlour Now, as he cleared away some fallen leaves, this mushroom hunter was horrified to find Miyako's severed head. Her face had been badly beaten, and there was a shoe print on her cheek. The mushroom hunter was absolutely horrified, and he ran down the mountain as fast as he could and called the authorities. And this devastating discovery shifted the search for Miyako from a rescue operation to a recovery mission. Now, DNA testing later confirmed that the severed head that the mushroom hunter had found belonged to Miyako. And over the next few days, the police continued their extensive search of the forested mountain region, deploying hundreds of officers to the case. They discovered various fragments of Miyako's mutilated remains scattered throughout the area. Notice how I say fragments of Miyako's mutilated remains. I mean, it wasn't a body they found, it was parts of her. Now, the following day after her head had been found, they located her left femur. It was determined that the flesh had been removed artificially rather than by animals. Now, on the 8th, they found her torso. Her breasts had been gouged out until her ribs were visible, and her genitals were chopped up to the point where her gender could not be determined. On the 9th, they discovered her left ankle. Now, investigators would go on to find additional remains, including a thigh bone, toenails, a shoe. The body parts had been placed in plastic bags and just discarded in multiple locations, believed to have been thrown from a vehicle, actually, the way that they were just kind of tossed around. It's absolutely disgusting. It's one thing murdering somebody and another thing to mutilate them to this degree so that they are just parts. That is one really messed up individual. Now, the examination of the body revealed that Miyako had suffered extensive head trauma from repeated blows while she was still alive, and marks on her neck suggested she had been strangled. The individual responsible for this crime attempted to cover their tracks by burning the remains before scattering her dismembered body parts in multiple locations around the mountain. Now, the police were stumped as to the identity and the motive of the perpetrator. I mean, why the hell would you do that? Miyako was a kind, sweet, likable young woman. She had no known enemies, and this obviously made the investigation even more challenging for the authorities because they lacked any obvious starting point. It didn't make sense that anyone would want to hurt Miyako. Now, a joint task force was formed between the police departments of Shimane and Hiroshima prefectures, and a large-scale investigation was subsequently launched. Now, a witness reported seeing a suspicious white sedan speeding along the route from Miyako's part-time job, but this vehicle wasn't located, and it was no longer seen after October the 26th. Now, another witness also claimed to have spotted a white car in the employee parking lot of the shopping mall around the time of Miyako's disappearance. Now, in response, the police examined footage from highway cameras and analysed data from the automatic license plate reader system, called the N system over there. And they searched for any suspicious vehicles that may have been in the vicinity of the crime scene. But, these efforts, they just didn't kind of come up with any useful leads at all. Now, a reward of up to 3 million yen, which is approximately 20,000 United States dollars, was offered to anyone who could provide information to assist in solving the case. Now, in an attempt to jog anyone's memory of potentially suspicious activity that they may have seen, thousands of flyers were distributed around the local area. They were distributed everywhere around the station, around the mall, around the ice cream parlour shop where Miyako worked. These flyers included Miyako's photograph, a map of the key locations, as well as the areas where the remains were found. Now, they really went all out. I'm quite impressed by how thorough the authorities were in trying to find out what had happened to Miyako. And I think as well, it's an indicator of just how low crime this area was. Now, the authorities were eager for any leads, and they even checked horror rentals at local video stores. It sounds kind of bizarre, especially when you think of Japan. I mean, I don't know about you, but I have seen some pretty horrific horror movies. I love horror movies. But you think about some of the worst horror movies, they're often Japanese, so they're very, very graphic and violent. So it does kind of seem a little bit odd that they were searching people that had taken out horror movies. But I think at the end of the day, I think it just shows how little they actually had to go on. And psychologists were even brought in to create a profile of the suspect. And psychologists theorized that the crime was one of opportunity, and the killer was likely to be a man between the ages of 20 and 40, and who was not acquainted with Miyako. Ultimately, however, despite the police's best efforts, I mean, they really did try everything, they still did not have much to go on. And with no leads or suspects, the case began to grow cold. Now, as time passed, the local media actually continued to keep Miyako's memory alive, eventually turning her story into a major national news event. Journalists from across Japan flocked to Hamada City, reporting from the various locations connected to Miyako. But it was one particular news report that stood out and captivated the attention of everybody who watched it. In this report, a television crew was broadcasting from the entrance of a forest around the time Miyako's torso was found. The camera was focused down a dark path that was the entrance to the forest road leading to Mount Garyu, where the mushroom hunter discovered Miyako's decapitated head. Now, as the reporter began this live broadcast, it's live, suddenly a woman's anguished voice was unexpectedly captured, saying, "This is very painful. Why only me?" Gives you chills, doesn't it? The reporter and the cameraman both confirmed that there was no one else in the vicinity of the recording and that the entire crew was male. So I'll play you the recording, see what you think.
広島県北広島町の我流山の林道の入り口です。今日の捜索は午後5時で終了し、私の後ろに張られていた規制線も現在は解かれています。広島県北広島町の我流山の林道の入り口です。今日の捜索は午後5時で終了し、私の後ろに張られていた規制線も現在は解かれています。
I mean, it's really, really difficult, isn't it? Because without being there, without knowing the situation, it's really, really difficult. If they are telling the truth and that there were only men on site, there was nobody else around, then that is freaky as hell. But, you know, we only have their words for that, so I don't know. I really don't know, but it's pretty chilling. Now, this disembodied voice heard on live television instantly transformed Miyako's story into an international sensation as viewers became convinced that they had heard Miyako's ghost. But, you know, despite the increased attention, the voice didn't provide any helpful information to the police, who remained perplexed about the identity of Miyako's killer. Months turned into years, and again, the case went cold. However, in 2016, 7 years after Miyako's disappearance, a specialized cold case team focused their attention on individuals with prior sexual offense records, leading them to the file of Yoshiharu Yano, a 33-year-old man with a history of sex-related crimes. Yoshiharu Yano was born in April 1976 in Kandacho, Shimonoseki City, Yamaguchi Prefecture. His father, who owned a rice business, passed away in 2008, a year before Miyako's murder. And Yoshiharu's mother worked as a domestic helper, and he also had a younger brother. Now, during his junior high school years, Yoshiharu was described as a quiet and serious student who struggled to communicate with girls. However, he actively participated in extracurricular activities, including being the head of the track and field club in his final year. He also held a black belt in judo. In high school, he was described as excelling academically. So basically, apart from being a little bit sort of quiet and shy around girls, there's no kind of red flags jumping out as yet. Now, Yoshiharu's situation changed after dropping out of university in order to devote himself to his band and to pursue romantic relationships. He held various part-time jobs until he eventually left the band and moved to Tokyo. Now, he later revealed on social media that he had developed focal dystonia in his left hand. And this was a condition where muscles can move involuntarily, affecting his ability to play in the band and leaving him depressed. You know, when you're really passionate about something, the thought that a physical condition can just take that away from you, that's a really difficult thing to deal with. Now, after moving to Tokyo, Yoshiharu committed 3 separate sexually motivated crimes. He threatened 3 women with a knife and sexually assaulted them. You know, I really find it difficult to understand why somebody who struggles in relationships, struggles to talk to the opposite sex, why they suddenly feel this right that they can just take what they want. I don't understand. And like I say, there were no red flags, really. I mean, yeah, he became depressed because he couldn't, do the thing he enjoyed, playing the music, being in the band. And that makes perfect sense that you're going to be depressed. But that still doesn't give you the right to destroy other people's lives. I don't understand it. Now, in August 2004, at the age of 28, Yoshiharu was arrested and sentenced to 3 years and 6 months in prison. Now, after being released from prison, Yoshiharu returned to his family's home in Shimonoseki City. For the next year and a half, he worked various part-time jobs before securing employment at a housing equipment company selling solar panels. That sounds fun. Although I think also relevant because obviously, he had these dreams, he had these aspirations to be in this band. He left university to even pursue this dream. And so here he is selling solar panels. But again, that doesn't give you the right to hurt people. Now, in 2009, he was transferred to the Hamada City sales office, where he would end up living, and this placed him near the location where Miyako was killed. Investigators found that Yoshiharu's car matched the security footage showing a white vehicle near the forest and mountain where Miyako's remains were discovered. So basically, this cold case team, they investigated Yoshiharu because he had these sexual offences and then found that pieces of the puzzle, little pieces of evidence, kind of matched where he was. And he even had the white car as well. And so finally, after 7 years, the authorities obtained the promising lead that they had been waiting for, as the evidence against Yoshiharu began to mount. Yoshiharu's employer reported that on the same day Miyako's remains were found, Yoshiharu had taken 2-day leave, claiming he needed to visit his family. His friends also reported during police interviews that Yoshiharu had boasted about doing a big thing, which in hindsight was clearly a reference to Miyako's murder. That's just horrendous, to be kind of glorifying it as this big thing. Now, as the investigation into Yoshiharu intensified, investigators were seen in his hometown inquiring about a specific type of plastic bag that had been used in the local area. Now, this plastic bag was actually significant because it was used by the NTT to deliver phone books. And basically, the colour and the text and the design on these bags, it differs depending on the year and the region of delivery. And it was discovered that the same type of plastic bag was distributed in Hamada City, where Yoshiharu's family home was located. And the reason that this was extremely significant is because a blood-stained fragment of that kind of plastic bag was found attached to Miyako's torso. But the most significant breakthrough of all came when Yoshiharu's home was searched, and a digital camera containing disturbing images of Miyako's final movements the night she disappeared was discovered. Yoshiharu had tried to destroy the evidence by deleting the images, but the police were able to recover them, and they retrieved 57 gruesome photographs, including images taken in the bathtub where Miyako was dismembered. I just don't get it. I just don't understand. It's that extra level of violation. Why violate somebody further? You've taken their life and now you're mutilating them as well. And yeah, arguably, when somebody does that, it's very often because they want to chop it up and conceal the body, so that it's not found. But by him just scattering the pieces about, obviously these body parts were going to be found. What is it about these killers as well, that they have to record everything? They have to put it all on a memory stick. Now, memory sticks, funnily enough, don't forget. You have to be pretty stupid to not realise that you're leaving evidence. I don't know. It's that whole kind of coming back and revisiting the gruesome things that you've done. It's really, really sick, the fact that you just want to kind of replay it. So from all this evidence, the authorities suspected that Yoshiharu had initially abducted Miyako and then proceeded to sexually assault her at his home before strangling her to death. It's believed he then dismembered her in the bathroom using a kitchen knife. What he does to her suggests a disturbing pattern of voyeurism and control, and possibly sadistic intent. This man is absolutely vile. And the thing is as well, obviously all murder is wrong. But when there's no reason for the murder, it's kind of doubly tragic. And when I say no reason, I mean things like jealousy and revenge and financial motives, things like that. But when it's just for sick, selfish gratification, it just makes it all the more senseless, not that any murder makes sense, but do you know what I mean? It's just even more senseless because there was no reason for it. It's absolute selfishness. Now, after killing Miyako, under the cover of darkness, Yoshiharu then drove to the mountain where he burned and discarded Miyako's body parts in an effort to conceal his crime. He did a really crap job. I mean, he was probably hoping as well that the animals would, pick up a lot of the parts. But by scattering so many parts and putting bits in bags and burning other bits, he just left too much evidence. He really was not very bright. And so on December the 20th, 2016, Yoshiharu was indicted on charges of murder, mutilating a corpse, and abandoning a body. However, in a cruel twist of fate, the police could not arrest Yoshiharu, and justice could not prevail. And the reason for this was because Yashiharu was dead. On November the 8th, 2009, just a few weeks after Miyako's murder and 2 days after her severed head was discovered, Yoshiharu and his mother were driving along Chigoku Expressway after visiting Yoshiharu's father's grave in Hamada City. Now suddenly, at around 3:07 in the afternoon, witnesses reported seeing a car with white smoke coming from the hood after colliding with a guardrail. Now, the witnesses described how this car, it was a small white car and it had 2 people inside, had been driving erratically, with the male driver repeatedly ramming into the guardrail and backing up again and then crashing into the guardrail again. The occupants of the car appeared terrified, as if the car was possessed, and they were screaming as the vehicle burst into flames. Now, when Highway Patrol arrived, they found the car on fire on the side of the road, with Yoshiharu's burned body in the driver's seat and his mother's burned body lying nearby. They were both deceased. There was no signs of braking or skidding, and the weather didn't seem to contribute to the accident. It's just really, really strange. Because why were they just ramming constantly into this guardrail? And so ultimately it was believed that the incident was either a double suicide or a murder-suicide, with Yoshiharu intentionally driving the car into the guardrail until it burst into flames. However, when this incident initially made the news, because it did make the news, it was overshadowed by the media's focus on Miyako. And so the 2 cases were never connected. Now, tragically, with Yoshiharu deceased, the police had no one to arrest. And so all they could do was close the case. And so justice was never served. However, for those that assert that Miyako's ghost had taken control of Yoshiharu's car that day, they believe that she got the ultimate revenge and carried out a way more fitting retribution than a prison sentence ever could. So what do you think? Based on eyewitness accounts that Yoshiharu's vehicle was deliberately smashing into the guardrail, it's unlikely that this was an accident. This therefore raises questions of whether Yoshiharu intentionally took his own life, as well as that of his mother. On the other hand, the timing of their visit to his father's grave could suggest feelings of guilt, a final farewell. I mean, he did try and destroy the evidence as well of that memory card. And that altogether kind of implies a deliberate act. Because Yoshiharu, he would have known that Miyako's body had been found. And that could have driven him to kind of make this desperate decision. But then again, the witnesses described Yoshiharu and his mother as looking absolutely terrified. And this kind of hints that their deaths were possibly unintentional, because why would they look so terrified? It is worth noting, though, that people can seem frightened even if they are aware of their impending fate. Even if Yoshiharu had planned this whole thing, he could still look terrified. of what was going on, even though he was doing it. And, another consideration is whether Yoshiharu's mother knew about her son's actions. While she might not have been aware of Miyako, she was aware of his past crimes. And as a mother, she would have had her suspicions, possibly. And that could be one of the reasons that Yoshiharu maybe took his mother with him, because she was onto him. Or maybe it was her that took the wheel of that car. Maybe that's why they were looking terrified. Maybe witnesses couldn't see that she was actually taking the wheel. I don't know. But that would kind of explain why it was going backwards and forwards, as if the mother was like driving it forward and the son trying to pull it back again. Or even the other way around, that Yoshiharu was driving into the guardrail and the mother was trying to pull it back again. It's all very, very strange, whatever. And of course, the other thing is, if the mother was suspicious, maybe Yoshiharu was trying to just kill her. Maybe he didn't plan for the car to catch on fire, and for him to die as well. I don't know. But the best theory is the theory that Miyako was seeking revenge on her killer and somehow took control of Yoshiharu's car and delivered him to his fiery demise in hell, where he belonged. Now, obviously, it seems completely implausible. Obviously, if you're a rational person, the whole idea is implausible. But when you combine that with her ghostly kind of voice that was heard, I don't know. But either way, it captures the imagination and leaves us wondering, did Miyako ultimately get the justice that she deserved? I bloody hope so. I really hope so. I do believe in the supernatural. I have had lots of experiences myself to not believe in the supernatural. And I'm not just talking about experiences on my own. I've had plenty of those. But when you're on your own, especially combined with my mental health issues, it's like, okay, is it mental health? Is it pareidolia? Is it just my imagination? There could be lots and lots of reasons. But the experiences that make me pretty certain that there is something have happened with other people. Other people have seen or sensed the same thing, or other people have been able to back up my experience. And that makes me believe. Don't get me wrong, a lot of the stuff out there, a lot of the mediums and all that stuff, a lot of it I think is rubbish. It's people playing on it. But there is some truth, I think. But that's just personal. And I really, really hope that Miyako got that justice, because if he didn't die, if Yoshiharu didn't die, the case would have just been forgotten about. And this way it's kept alive, and it keeps Miyako's memory alive. And that's the most important thing. So anyway, you have an amazing Halloween time. Don't eat too many sweets. Actually, do eat too many sweets. Do what you like. But enjoy yourselves, whatever you're doing. I actually wasn't allowed to celebrate Halloween when I was a kid. I never got that experience when I was a very, very small child of doing all that, which is probably why I ultra love it now. But yeah, so you have fun, and see you back here for another case at my true criminal abode. Bye.
Beautiful nightmare. Beautiful nightmare.